Hello, dearest listeners, and welcome to the Longevity and Lifestyle podcast, where I invite pioneers and thought leaders in their respective fields to give us the strategies, tools, and practices to live better and help reach our true potential. My guest today is celebrity longevity doctor, Dr. Kien Vuu, also known as Dr. V. Dr. V is one of the most sought-after health professionals in the United States, and his inspiring story takes us on a journey from being the only baby to survive on an 8-month-long refugee boat to turning his own health around and sharing his advice in his newly released book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance. Dr. V's personal life and health transformation happened by looking inward and focusing on his path to self-discovery, self-love, and self-acceptance, whilst also overcoming multiple chronic diseases himself. At his Vuu MD Longevity and Performance Clinic in Los Angeles, Dr. Vuu works with top corporate executives, athletes, celebrities, and high-performing professionals to optimize their health and enhance vitality and performance. Dr. Vuu also trains the next generation of health physicians at UCLA, directly driving the shift from 20th century pill prescription and rapid diagnosis method to the 21st century preventative and health optimization approach. In this episode, we discuss Dr. Vuu's path to where he is now, his personal struggles that has transformed into successes, and how to live an abundant, happy, and full life. In optimal health, of course. Before we begin, please subscribe to the podcast to get your weekly dose of longevity inspiration. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment to let me know what you think on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or reach out to us on Instagram at Longevity and Lifestyle. Thanks, and please enjoy. Welcome to the Longevity and Lifestyle podcast, Dr. Kien Vuu, or also known as Dr. V. It's a real pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be able to connect with people from the other side of the world, knowing that, no matter where we're at, we are still in a human experience. We are still in this together, and to connect with you is a real joy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And across the pond, as they sometimes say as well, right? So you are one of the most sought after longevity and performance physicians in the United States and slowly globally as well. But before we get into that, I would love to start with your own story and health journey. You've overcome a lot of obstacles in your life, from my understanding. And I know you're going to be a big inspiration for my listeners here. So can you tell us about that journey and how it shaped your path to medicine?
Yeah, certainly. Let's start a couple years ago, where I find myself in a health despair. And then I'll go even further back, because I'm going to share how my story up to that, how early experience in my life has shaped my disease that I got a few years ago. So about 5 years ago, somebody would pierce inside my life and they would say, wow, this guy's got a pretty ideal life. He's a medical doctor. He's got a dream house. He's got the car. He's got everything in life that is deemed, quote, success on paper, right? And for those people who are not watching, I did the air quotes, quote, success. Right. So I was traveling around the world. I was speaking on, the advances in interventional radiology. So for those people who don't know, I'm a conventionally trained medical doctor, MD. I was trained in the field of interventional radiology. So radiology is medical imaging, X-rays, CT scans, ultrasounds. It's all this advanced technology, probably the most advanced technology available to medicine these days. We can use that to detect and pierce inside the body to see what disease look like. And as an interventional radiologist, I basically use those technologies to do minimally invasive surgeries or minimally invasive interventions on people. So I worked with people with end-stage diabetes, cancer, renal disease. And as a radiologist, I also knew what those diseases look like in the body. So I was really educated and knew the broad spectrum of the different diseases that were there. And in fact, I was probably at the top of my game treating a lot of these diseases. But then I found myself, being at the top of my game. Underneath the white coat, I was overweight. I was diabetic. I had high blood pressure, and I was on prescription medications. And I looked at myself in the mirror many days and I said, wow, I didn't like the man I had become. And how am I, a doctor who's giving medical advice and telling people to be healthy, when I'm a walking chronic disease statistic myself? And, I didn't understand why that was the case. And certainly I thought maybe I was just dealt with bad genes, and that's why my life is the way it is. And it was really at that point I started to do a deep dive a deep dive into trying to understand, okay, my life will not be subjected to medications only for the rest of my life. How do I turn this around? And it was really diving into a little bit of who I am as a person and how I became this doctor. And, the Dalai Lama had a quote. He said, what he found most interesting about humanity, he said, man, because he would sacrifice his health in order to make money and then sacrifice his money to recuperate his health.
Yep.
So, I was really that story. And actually, a lot of my clients share that very similar story to me. So for people who don't know, I was a immigrant to America. I was born a couple years after the end of the Vietnam War in Vietnam, and they basically seized all the businesses, seized all the money that was there. My parents were pretty much left with nothing. And they said to themselves, this is no place to raise a child. And so overcoming all odds, they basically took me, escaped with me by boat. And we were on a refugee boat filled with 2,000 refugees trying to sail to a better future. In fact, we sailed to the Philippines. Yeah, 2,000.
Wow.
Yeah. I was probably one of the few infants on the boat, the only one that survived.
So brave. I'm getting goosebumps literally, like thinking about this. Wow.
Every time I talk about it, I get goosebumps too, because my daughter right now, she's 6 months old today.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I just look at her and I'm like, how did my parents have me at that age on a boat with 2,000 people? I mean, they were like, kid, there was no space for you to kind of walk or crawl. We were basically carrying you on this boat for 8 months.
And also not to fall off. And I mean, 8 months as well, to even think about that. 8 months on a boat.
There were people that basically fell off the boat. People died of dysentery. I had dysentery. I nearly died as well. And then once there was room in the refugee camps, we were in the refugee camps in the Philippines. And then as an early Christmas present in 1979, I'm dating myself right now, we're sponsored to America. And one would think a child growing up, having survived this refugee experience, would be
as an infant though, right? I mean, obviously you raised something.
There's no conscious memory of it. But, if I look back now, there's certainly, what my parents went through.
Trauma.
There's trauma. And there's certainly some trauma that I picked up too, because there's a lot of energy, of fear, of paranoia that transferred over.
Yeah.
And so as a kid growing up, you would think, oh, okay, this kid would be very grateful that he survived this experience. But that wasn't the case. I grew up, we were in a very poor neighborhood in Los Angeles, and I got bused to a more affluent area for school. And when I was there, I was probably one of the few Asian kids that were there. And so I was constantly being teased for, not being white, for the holes in my hand-me-down clothes, for the stinky Chinese food my mom sent me to school with, right? Go back to your home country, Chinky. I got all of that.
Oh, gosh.
And so, those experiences really shaped me. And I remember a lot of times coming home from school, just not liking who I was, not liking the skin I was in. I wish I was taller. I wish I was richer. I wish I didn't have my family. I wish I lived in a different neighborhood. So all those feelings of not being worthy and not being enough, that's what drove this person. And I constantly had to develop this shell of, how do I become somebody? If my skin's not accepted, how do I become somebody who could belong? When inside, I didn't really feel like that was the case. And throughout my life,
how do you build that facade, right? And I think that that's a lot of learned behavior, and I'm sure you're going to get to it, but it's the core inside is just not strong, right? So
absolutely,
you push through.
And you know what? That's a great motivator for a lot of people. And a lot of people, develop, parts of the personality that is good. For me, I developed, wanting to be happy or learning how to speak or entertain or to have a bubbling personality.
Yeah,
but all
me
that
too.
was
I
just
shy.
right. All that, as a facade of this inside not being enough. And no matter what I achieved on the outside, the inside still felt the same way. And I was constantly chasing that thing that the Dalai Lama said was success or money. Right. And I had basically used that white coat to cover up for that not enoughness I had inside. Well, guess what? When your body's going through that stress, when you're in that mode of chasing, you don't feel that, those feelings of true gratitude or that you can be yourself. You're in stress. And a lot of people, when they're in those stress states, as I talk in my book, will reach for unhealthy habits. They might not sleep very well. They're not going to eat very well. Certainly, they're not going to move. They're not going to live a life congruent with a healthy state. And these are things I did not learn in medical school. It was really tapping in to who I truly am as a person, acknowledging, accepting, and loving who that person is, and then diving deep into nutrition, epigenetics, and what it really means to be healthy, that I was able to reverse my conditions in 4 to 6 months. And
Amazing.
it was really the ability to do that without medicine, without the stuff that I got trained to do, said, oh my God, there's a whole new world out there.
Yeah.
And, the reason why I share that story is to let people know that really you, I'm looking from the camera, you are really your best medicine. And if you
Yeah.
could understand who you are, if you just
Mhm.
understand why you're here and just live that way and share yourself with other people, that's the medicine that will, put you at having the highest odds of being in optimal health, having longevity and peak performance, and put you at very low risk of getting chronic disease, potentially even reversing your disease if you're not that far along.
Yeah. And that's what's so exciting, I think, as well. And that's the purpose of what we're doing with Longevity and Lifestyle, is bringing pioneers and thought leaders like yourself on. I mean, we've had Dr. Dale Bredesen with his Reversing Cognitive Decline in Alzheimer's, the program my mother's on. So it's very close to my heart as well. We've touched on so many amazing things. So I think at the beginning, you said about 5 years ago, you had this kind of, looking in the mirror, thinking, I'm treating all these diseases, yet I'm on the path myself. And you did a deep dive. How did that deep dive look like? How did you reverse your own chronic diseases?
Yeah, great question. Well, it just started off with, what did I know? And I didn't really know a lot when I first started, but I said, what?
You were a trained doctor, so you did.
I was a trained doctor. But the thing is, they didn't teach you any of this stuff, right? The stuff that they have at the hospital. I'm going to give you an example. The foods that they had at the hospital. Some hospitals I worked at actually had fast food that were there. All the hospitals had these energy drinks that were there that were loaded with sugar. And basically, my mornings were large cups of coffee with like 6 pumps of International Delight, which is a lot of sugar, plus energy drinks throughout the day. So it was like getting a heaping, amount of sugar in my body, which is very inflammatory. So the first things I did was just remove the sugar, remove the energy drink, started to, eat a little bit better and be a little bit more conscious about sleeping and working out. And I already noticed like huge shifts when I started to do that. Then I went a little bit deeper. Then I went into the more personal development route and really started to understand myself and understand the emotional states I was in. Then I started to study emotional states. And, hopefully we'll get into this later, but the emotions that we feel every day actually dictate our biology. And when I started to understand that and started becoming aware of, okay, well, where am I spending a lot of these emotions? All right, well, if it's these emotions that are putting us in an inflammatory state, can I shift that?
Yeah.
What are some things I could do to shift some of that? As I started to do that, I started to notice, okay, even more shifts that are happening in my body. Then I went, and did a lot of the personal development things. And I just started to be like, I am much more connected now, knowing myself, showing up as myself, and then using my story or my experiences to help other people.
Yeah.
Then there was that spiritual side. There was that community side. And as I studied epigenetics, I knew all of these things actually has biochemical changes that happen in our body that actually gift us with abundant health, peak performance, and longevity when we start to tap into these things. So that was basically the journey. It started off really kind of working on the physical things that I knew. And then as I started to dive in deeper with myself, it was mastering the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual aspects of what contributes to how our cells behave. And basically, it was that entire learning that I put in my book, Thrive State, right behind me.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk about that in a little bit as well. And there's so many aspects I love, because also, I've discovered years ago also like meditation and emotional states and things like that as well. I'd love to hear your view and talk a little bit more about your journey there and what you learned about it, and also about epigenetics, and that, it is science-based. You can actually see what is happening in the body in these different states as well. It's so incredible. But what would you say is what in your view is the relationship between chronic diseases, performance, and longevity? How does that all correlate with one another? Because I think many people see it like, oh, this is heart disease or this is dementia. These are all not interrelated. They're not interlinked. But what's your view on that?
Yeah, that's the conventional medicine view of things. They break it down into these organ systems, and you've got one specialist for everything, and they're not understanding how they all work. As I started to build my understanding of epigenetics and all these other things, it's all very related. And things that you need to do to fix this one heart disease over there might be the same things you need to do to fix depression and anxiety and all these things, because they're all connected. And what is these things? Well, it all boils down to the state of our cells, right? Cells work together through energy to form tissues. Tissues work together through energy to form organs. Organs work together in organ systems, and then they make up who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we want longevity, peak
Mm-hmm.
performance, optimal
Mm-hmm.
health, we
Mm-hmm.
want all our systems to be optimal, right? We want our nervous
Mm-hmm.
system to be optimal. We want our musculoskeletal system to be optimal.
Mm-hmm.
We want, our cardiovascular system to be optimal. And
Mm-hmm.
what then does that all boil back down to? Well, if we want optimal systems, then we need optimal tissues and optimal cells. So if we
Yeah.
have optimal cells and our cells optimally functioning, that's when we have longevity, peak performance, and optimal health.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the flip side of the coin is basically what causes chronic symptoms and chronic disease. If
Mm-hmm.
you have suboptimal cells, you form suboptimal tissues,
Mm-hmm.
suboptimal organs, suboptimal systems. You
Mm-hmm.
have suboptimal cardiovascular system. That's when you've got maybe high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, heart attack, and stroke. Suboptimal immune system will give you chronic infections, autoimmune disease, or cancer. Suboptimal nervous system will give you dementia or Alzheimer's disease and things like that. So it's suboptimal systems that will lead to symptoms or chronic symptoms
Mm-hmm.
or chronic disease. So that's how they're all related. So it's really how the cell is functioning. And here's the good news. That state of our cells has less to do with what we got from mom and dad, which is our DNA, but
Mm-hmm.
actually how the DNA responds to its cellular environment. And the
Mm-hmm.
great news is this: what makes up that cellular environment, or what I call the bioenergetic state, what
Yeah.
makes up that bioenergetic state is made up
Mm-hmm.
of the things that you feed your cells. And in
Mm-hmm.
my book, I call them the 7 bioenergetic elements.
Mm-hmm.
If you focus your life on these 7 things, you create an energy around the cells, and you're telling your cells, hey, I'm going to give you everything you need for optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And what are those 7 things? There's sleep, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
movement,
Yeah.
stress and emotional mastery,
Mm-hmm.
relationships, our thoughts and mindset, and
Mm-hmm.
purpose. And if we
I love
focus on
that.
those things, that's
Yeah.
kind of like the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule. It's not 100%, but if you master those 7 things, your ability to have optimal health, longevity, and peak performance are really high, and you getting chronic disease or those chronic symptoms are going to be very low. I mean, for the rest of the 10 or maybe 20%, it might be, an infection, or it might be a heavy metal or an allergy where you
But
would
they're
talk to a doctor
solvable.
like me. Exactly.
Yeah.
But for generally everybody else, if you focus on those things, your
Yeah.
ability to access the very best version of yourself as well as optimal health is really in your fingertips.
Yeah, which is so exciting as well. And I love that you're empowering people and sharing this information. And I'd love to just even take a deep dive into those 7 different areas.
Sure.
And just what are your top tips, and just to walk through them, because, people are like, sleep. Yeah, I need to sleep more. Like, what does it mean? I mean, I wear an Oura ring, and it's been a real eye opener for me. I'm still trying to figure out how to get more REM sleep. I'm good at deep sleep and other things, but REM sleep, nope. Could you just walk us through the top tips for the 7 different areas?
Sure, certainly. If we went through sleep, sleep is so important because it controls your circadian rhythm, which is really the ebb and flow of how your body responds, during the day, right? You need to wake up, in the morning. So you need some cortisol burst in the morning to kind of wake you up. And then later at night, things wind down. Everything is tied together, right? Your circadian rhythm is tied to your digestive system. And there's certain times in the day you should be exercising and thinking and things like that. So it's all tied together, and that's all tied together also in the hormones that are released. And sleep is one of those things that allows you to reset. And if you're not getting good sleep, your hormones are off, and you may feel like crap, which is why sleep is so important.
I've had many years of that as well. Yeah. I can testify.
So how do you get better sleep? Well, I mean, if we look at it throughout the day, sleep doesn't start right when you decide to say, oh, okay, you know what? It's time to go to bed, right?
I wish.
In order for you to get good sleep, it's really the routine that you carry throughout the day, right? Because if your circadian rhythm is off, when you really want to get to sleep, you might not be able to. So how do I start off my day? Well, I start off my day, when I wake up, trying to go outside and getting a lot of sunshine immediately. Sunshine to your skin, sunshine to your eyes. That will reset your circadian rhythm. It will, give you that little cortisol bump.
And how many minutes? Like, what would you recommend?
I would say 20 to 25 minutes. And the great thing you can do during that time is getting some exercise. Then you're getting a 2-for, by doing both in the morning.
Yeah.
Now, throughout the day, it's not a matter of if, but when stress hits you. And having things throughout the day for you to, to ground yourself back. So it might be a meditation practice. It might be walking. It might be journaling. It might be doing some of those things throughout the day, just so that, you could be grounded. Otherwise, you let stress take you over when you're trying to sleep at night. Those things are still in your mind, right?
The monkey mind. Yeah.
Exactly. Then we talk about stimulants like alcohol or caffeine. I don't drink any alcohol anymore. And then I
Mhm.
certainly limit any coffee or caffeine before 2 p.m. And then making sure that you exercise every day. That movement of exercise, particularly when you get in the morning, is going to help
Mhm.
you sleep at night.
Mhm.
When you're getting ready to sleep, turning off the blue lights or wearing blue light blocking glasses so that the
Mhm.
blue light actually suppresses melatonin, which
Mhm.
is necessary for you to get deep sleep, maybe some of that REM sleep. So I don't know if blue light blocking glasses would be good for you,
Well,
but
yeah, I have all the screens that turn colors, but yeah, I need to
right.
still optimize and hack this. So I to be
Yeah.
continued, but yeah, go ahead.
So that's great. And then also, making sure you have a nice sleep environment. Use your bed for sleeping and for sex only. Don't do the TV in there and things like that. So have
Yeah.
a really nice environment. You might want a good sleep routine, which might include a warm bath, a
Mhm.
massage, something
Mhm.
like that. And then, maybe even some journaling, journaling what you did during the day, what you were grateful for during the day, what you
Mhm.
need to do tomorrow. That's going to
Mhm.
get that stuff out of your head and
Mhm.
onto a piece of paper so that you're not, enumerating it, when you're trying to go to bed. So just having that whole kind of day routine to prepare you
Mhm.
for a good night's rest, I find those things to be very, very helpful.
Really, really helpful. And what about some of the other areas that you touched on then? So, I mean, you said also with exercise, and people are like, I went for a little walk, for 2 minutes. Is that
Mhm.
exercise? What's exercise?
Walking is exercise and movement, which is why I label it movement and not necessarily exercise, because some people are like, I will not exercise. I'm willing to move.
Okay.
And you know what? That's what our ancestors were.
Mhm.
All these things that I'm saying, all these 7 things are the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual things that our ancestors were basically programmed in our genes to be able to live. And it's
Mhm.
really the departure from living that way is what's screwing with our biology and giving us
Mhm.
chronic symptoms from chronic disease.
Mhm.
Our ancestors moved every single day. Right now, a lot of people have desk jobs in front of their computers and they're
Mhm.
not moving. So
Yeah.
any form of activity that you are willing to do every day, the more you move, the better. And in my book, I talk about different movement strategies. I
Mhm.
weightlift because, lean muscle is the most metabolically active tissue we have in our body, which is great
Mhm.
for, keeping blood sugars in check and for
Mhm.
you to have great metabolism.
Mhm.
So I weightlift. And then I
Mhm.
also do high intensity interval training. And once a week, I go out for a long sprint,
Uh-huh.
but
And is
just
that for
walking
men
every
and
day.
women as well? Would you recommend? And I mean, a lot of our listeners are more like, optimizers wanting to be peak performers. We also have people with different illnesses as well, right? But if you wanted to optimize things, would you say, that weightlifting, growing muscle, and especially women tend not to do that as much? Would you highly recommend that?
Yeah, I would probably say don't do it necessarily to look like a bodybuilder.
No, that's
But
hard. I know
right,
bodybuilders are like, people think they can just come to the gym and look like us. They're like, no way. Yeah.
right. But I would say focusing on having more lean muscle is important because having
Mhm.
lean muscle is going to increase your bone density. So as you get older,
Mhm.
you don't fall and suddenly have a fracture. A fracture after a fall, particularly in the elderly, is one of the highest incidences of people going into death because your body has to, overcome a lot. It's an inflammatory state, that trauma of
Mhm.
having a fracture, which is why I think, developing lean muscle is very important. So I think,
Mhm.
as we get older, I think that's more important. And again, it's not so that you're looking like a bodybuilder per se, because if you don't have that, you lose lean
Mhm.
muscle, your body replaces that with fat. So
So it's
you want to
nicer to
just
have
make
the
sure you gain
muscle
it. Right, exactly.
than the fat as well. You gave a famous TEDx talk called The Unconventional Prescription. You are your best medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that and about the vision and mission that you have with it?
Yeah, well, the talk was really, before I wrote the book, and it was rediscovering who I was as a person and
Mhm.
stepping into that person, stepping into my authenticity and
Mhm.
showing up to the world as me,
Mhm.
along with all those positive emotions that were there, was my medicine. That's how I
Mhm.
reversed disease. And really, it was the idea that, so many people are not awakened to who they are in their
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
as you awaken to you and as you rediscover you and as you live as you'll find that maybe if you happen to be dealing with some disease before, stepping
Mhm.
into yourself is a great starting point to reverse that.
Mhm. I love that. And you talked about the emotional journey. So you were, when you had 5 years ago, your moment and sort of looking at the diseases and fixing that, but then it was the process around emotions and thought and mindset. Can you talk us a little bit about that journey that you went through, the different processes, and what you recommend to clients and patients?
Yeah, certainly. So we bring up stress and emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say that I don't think I was a very happy person. I was always chasing things,
Mm-hmm.
and I showed up with a smile all the time, but that was the
Yeah.
mask I learned to put on, right?
Yeah.
And then I started to study the different emotional states, like when you're stressed,
Mm-hmm.
when you're worried, when you're
Mm-hmm.
fearful, when
Mm-hmm.
there's hate in your body, when there's resentment there. Those negative emotional states
Mm-hmm.
actually drive up the inflammatory response in our body. Your body really has, when we talked about our optimal cellular state, if you're giving the cell everything it needs, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. I'm going to do what I'm here to do, which is grow, which is to heal. And we've got
Mm-hmm.
enormous capabilities to heal.
Yeah.
When you don't give the cell what it needs, it thinks that it's in danger or
Mm-hmm.
it's in a stress or survive state. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you activate the inflammatory process.
Mm-hmm.
So those negative or lower vibrational emotional states, like I just mentioned, makes
Mm-hmm.
your body actually think that you're in a stress or survive state. So what happens in that state? Well, your body will actually increase inflammation and it
Mm-hmm.
will lower your immunity. And that really sets the stage of getting, chronic symptoms and chronic
Mm-hmm.
disease, just like I talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started to understand that, I was like, oh my God, if I
Mm-hmm.
spend my time in these worried or stress states, how do I get out of it? One, here's the cool thing with everything that I'm mentioning here.
Mm-hmm.
These are all energetically connected in our body.
Mm-hmm.
These physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual practices are all connected. If you are low in one area in your life, if that's a hard area to address, the
Mm-hmm.
cool thing is because they're all energetically connected, you could work on
Mm-hmm.
something else that might be easier. And for a
And
lot
it
of
will
people,
raise
it's
it as
just,
well. Okay.
yeah, a lot of it is working on the physical stuff before
Uh-huh.
working on all these other things. And you'll notice that it's easier. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
as I started to sleep better, eat better, and move,
Mm-hmm.
I naturally just felt better. Those
Mm-hmm.
were all the physical things. Then you have more energy to
Mm-hmm.
tackle some of these other things. And
Mm-hmm.
as you start to feel better, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
start to think better, which will also, now that things run in, like everything outside of life might be the same, but you see it from a different lens because
Mm-hmm.
when your energy increases, your antenna for receiving start to change as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other cool part is recognizing as you shift one thing, it makes it very easier to shift the other things. And, the great thing to do, with the emotional things is just recognizing, oh, okay, I've got these emotions here. Now,
Mm-hmm.
where does it come when we talk about thoughts, our mindset, and our belief
Mm-hmm.
systems? Well, these things, and a lot of it, we come up with thoughts and our beliefs at a very early age,
Mm-hmm.
from the ages of 0 to 7, our brains like a sponge. They will
Mm-hmm.
take in things like, ancestral things that, might get passed down to your parents, who get passed down to you, stuff you see
Mm-hmm.
in the media, in your family, society will start to put in all these belief systems that are in your brain. And now you've got a set of belief systems. And basically, the circumstances in the world kind of run through these belief systems and then you will interpret that as safe or not safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then your body will react with an emotion,
Yeah.
right? And it's through these subconscious beliefs then that give us these emotions. And then you got to say, oh, okay, well, I'm stressed out. So is there a saber-toothed tiger right behind me right
Mm-hmm.
now? Or am I
Mm-hmm.
falling off a 10-story building? Because if that's not the case,
Yeah.
oh, then there's something on the inside. Maybe it's that belief that I'm not enough. Maybe it's the
Mm-hmm.
belief that I'm not worthy or that I don't belong. Some of
Mm-hmm.
these limiting beliefs that got implanted in there that was
Mm-hmm.
not really you. And if
Mm-hmm.
you start to understand that that's the case, that unless there's true danger that you're
Mm-hmm.
facing, and if that danger's not there, then you got to say, okay, maybe there's these beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't go through that in my book, but I do go through that in my online course, the Thrive State Accelerator, which
Mm-hmm.
I'll give your listeners a discount if they want to do. But there are exercises
That would
that
be
you can
great.
actually do
Uh-huh.
to question some of those beliefs and to start
Mm-hmm.
to install some new empowering ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start to shift some of those negative beliefs that put you in those negative states and then have the intention of really installing these positive ones that
Mm-hmm.
put you in these positive emotional states, because as those negative emotional states increase the inflammatory process,
Mm-hmm.
emotions like love, like gratitude, like
Mm-hmm.
laughter, like connection, all those
Mm-hmm.
emotional states are
Mm-hmm.
actually anti-aging.
which is so fantastic. And I mean, not only do they feel good, it's like win-win-win, right?
Right,
Your
exactly.
health span increases, your longevity increases, you feel good, you better relationships. I mean, it's really amazing. And
Yeah.
how was that journey? I mean, out of interest for you, how did you come to that? How did you go down that path from, looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking, what am I doing wrong? Okay, I need a fix from the outside. And then how did you find that way to the emotional side of things? Because that's, quite far away from traditional Western medicine.
Yeah. So I have to admit to the audience here that, I am a constant work in progress. There are
We all.
times that, I find myself, in that monkey mind. Like, oh, and, sometimes I find myself there, for a couple of minutes,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there for a little bit longer. And then finally I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to snap out of it now. I've
Mm-hmm.
indulged in this long enough. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly doing the work. And what does it look like for me in the process? Well, it's, installing new practices and having the awareness of what you might be going through. If you can kind of look at yourself and look at your life and then look at your mind, if you can
Mm-hmm.
be the observer of your mind and not
Yeah.
be like, okay, all my thoughts in here are real. And let me tell you, everybody, your thoughts, most of them, 70 to 80% of your thoughts are negative
Mm-hmm.
and are false, but they're used to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
They're used to protect you from danger or perceived danger because, you know, our body feels like if we don't belong or fit in, you might get cast away. Our ancestors used to get cast away, out of
From
their
the
community.
village. Yeah.
Exactly. And
And
that's a
left to the
dangerous
tigers.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's used to keep us safe, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
very primitive brain. It's great, that something like that's there so that when you're touching hot water, you pull away right away,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not there. It's not so great if you're not aware of it and it leads your life.
Yeah.
So
What are your favorite hacks in a day that some of the audience members could maybe use as well when you catch yourself going down that negative path or that monkey mind taking over, because it has such a profound impact also on your health? So what are little hacks that someone could try and do?
great question. One of the things Tony Robbins says is in your head, you're dead. So if you find yourself actually in your head and not necessarily in your body or in the present space, if you're
Mm-hmm.
just in here, your body thinks that there might be danger or might be stress going on, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you're in that space, you're in the sympathetic state of your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fight, flight, freeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
So techniques to bring you back to the parasympathetic to calm you down is so important. So here's some hacks.
Mm-hmm.
And these are basically hacks that you would do when you can imagine there's no saber-toothed tiger behind you and you're just relaxed. Well, what happens? Well, one, you could do things from the physical level, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you start to breathe very slowly
Mm-hmm.
into your
So in through the
nose,
nose.
out through
Mm-hmm.
the mouth, just very slowly, and you keep your exhale longer than your inhale. What you do is you activate your vagus nerve and you put yourself into the parasympathetic state because guess
Mm-hmm.
what? Will you be feeling that way or breathing that way when there's saber-tooth tigers behind you? No, you wouldn't, right?
Most
You're
likely not.
panicking,
Yeah.
you're breathing very fast. So that's one way to hack it. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing is, well, what does deer like to do when they're not being chased by a saber-tooth tiger? When they're just grazing, in the meadow, they're just
Mm-hmm.
going to look up into nature and just gaze,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Soft
Let me fall
gaze. Yeah.
asleep. So
Mm-hmm.
if you get out in nature and you softly gaze out,
Mm-hmm.
in nature, you
Mm-hmm.
relax your eyes. And again, that's not something you do when there's saber-tooth tigers behind you, but your body learns to do that. So when you do that, when you just do a
Mm-hmm.
soft gaze, you bring yourself there. Other hacks you can do is listen to music that puts you in those positive emotional states,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
use music, use movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you could just stand in a power pose, right? There's a
Yeah.
Harvard study that demonstrates that if you stand in a superhero or a heroine's pose, you
Uh-huh.
actually lower cortisol and you
Mm-hmm.
increase testosterone, which
Yeah.
increases the feelings of confidence that you have in your body.
Yeah. There's a
Uh,
great TED talk by Amy Cuddy as
yep.
well. Yeah. I
Yep.
love that one. Yeah. It's really,
Uh,
really great.
I go through a lot of these little hacks, but I'm, just pulling stuff out of my head. There's a great quote that I constantly go back to, and it's from
I love
Austrian
quotes.
Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl.
Mm-hmm.
He was a physician, in the Holocaust, and he witnessed a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friends pass away and a lot of just atrocities in that camp. And he said this: between stimulus and response, there's a space.
Mm-hmm.
And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our
Mm-hmm.
response lies our growth and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And this just says this: we could have all these subconscious beliefs or things that might be leading the way that might not be us.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can pause and create that space and then decide in that space how we want to respond, that's the magic. So if you find yourself like caught in a negative emotional state, pause and do 10 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. What does it do? Again, activates your vagus nerves, puts you in parasympathetic. All right.
Mhm.
And then I want people to act, or ACT, which stands for awareness, choice, and then take action. So you
Mhm.
might have the awareness, okay, I'm starting to feel nervous, worried, anxious, whatever it might be. Okay, have that awareness.
Mhm.
Ask yourself where it is in your body. All right.
Mhm.
So I'm starting to feel this thing. Here's the thing, when you start to tap into that parasympathetic state, you already start to notice that that charge will start to dissipate. You're not going to be as nervous or worried. Then you might have the awareness, okay, I'm starting to feel this way. Well, why is that the case? Oh, is that belief that I'm not enough again? Is that stress,
Mhm.
or money or whatever it might be? It might be those things that come up.
Mhm.
Then you see, choose. All right, just for fun, can I choose to be happy or feel
Mhm.
gratitude or feel
Mhm.
love or feel
Mhm.
connected? Can I make my body feel that? And
Mhm.
this is all a muscle. When you train this, you get better and better in doing that. Then
Mhm.
you choose that intention. And then from that new energy or intention, love, gratitude, joy, whatever it is, take a new
Mhm.
action from that
Mhm.
space.
Yeah.
When you do that, you
Mhm.
really like short circuited the old response that you're
Mhm.
conditioned to, and
Mhm.
you're laying down tracks for something new.
Mhm.
And really, it's just training your body to be in those positive emotional states. And that way, you are not subject to basically all that negative programming that
Mhm.
we grew up with that is in our brain, but instead choose the reality we want to step into and live as that. And I find that to be, very, very empowering, because you could use that same technique if you're starting to not feel anxious or worried, but oh man, I really want to reach out for that chocolate cake right now. Oh, there's that stimulus, between stimulus
What?
and response. There's a space. Do the
Yeah.
10 deep breaths and do that
Mhm.
act process. And
Mhm.
hopefully you choose to like go for a walk or sip on some sugar-free sparkling water. But
And make that choice as well. And it's
and
really
it's
beautifully
really in
said.
our choices, in our habits, in our actions
Yeah.
that make up our bioenergetic state, as
Mhm.
well as our longevity, performance, and optimal health.
Yeah, and so beautifully said. And thank you for sharing that. And also the quotes. Viktor Frankl is such an inspiration also. And I'd love to take a deep dive into your book now, Thrive State, Your
Yeah.
Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance. So how did it go from having your own eureka moment, doing your own discovery? You had the TED Talk. And what was your motivation behind putting it all in the book and, bringing it all together, and the bioenergetic model, really getting it out there? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So I saw a lot of changes in my body as I went through my disease reversing process, but I
Mhm.
wanted to make sense of all of it. And I also wanted to put it together in a way that it's easy to understand, and also as a framework I can use to say, okay, can I diagnose or can I help somebody else with this problem?
Mhm.
Because, modern medicine says, hey, you get this medical history, but you're not asking questions about how much they're sleeping, what they're eating,
Mhm.
and all these other things in their life. So I wanted a tool I could use. And as I started to study health and epigenetics and anti-aging and regenerative medicine, I started to notice these patterns, right?
Mhm.
Well, what are the things to decrease depression? Like, okay, exercise, sleep better, eat better.
You're like, oh,
Okay,
this
well,
sounds
how do you
familiar.
lower your blood pressure? Okay, exercise, sleep better. So all these different things, or all these different diseases, what
Yeah.
are all the common things are common? They start to show up over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And once I started to understand that, I started to understand that, okay, disease isn't some isolated thing in one particular organ system, but it's
Mhm.
because the cells aren't given what they need. And
Mhm.
basically, when the cells aren't given what they need, our body is not talking to each other in an optimal way. That's when you get, disease symptoms. And when I
Mhm.
pieced that all together, I was like, wow, this is really a good framework to approach life and health, and made a lot of sense. And that's why I wanted to put it together. One, so that I had something I could work with my clients with. And I found that once I evaluated somebody's bioenergetic state and where they were, and as
Mhm.
we started to address some of those things, a
Mhm.
lot of their symptoms sort of disappeared. That was really the crux of as the putting it all into a system. And I go into the science of how the old way of thinking about health is, you get stuff from mom and dad, which is your DNA, and
Mhm.
that's the health that you're given. But
Mhm.
that's actually not the case. Our DNA is not a fixed thing. If our DNA was fixed, nothing was changeable, we would basically be a one cell thing, because, you got the same DNA in every single cell. But what
Mhm.
makes your eye cell different from your lung cell, different from your heart cell, is that not all the genes are turned on in exactly the right time. And it's how these genes are turned on and turned off on a moment to moment, like microsecond to microsecond basis, that what determines how a cell behaves. And that's how you get the different cells in your body. And that's how you get optimal health in your body as well, is how this DNA is being expressed. And it turns out that the DNA is constantly listening and interacting with the environment that's around it, this bioenergetic state. And as I, start to explain it this way, people are like, oh, wow, I had no idea I can be in control of my bioenergetic state. So I find putting it in a framework that people can truly understand empowers them. And when people can say, oh my God, I'm in the thrive state, that's something that people can reach for and really empowers them to do their own work.
It's so fantastic. And I'd love for people interested to understand, say a patient comes to you and they're saying, I'm a bit tired. I'm, off my game, maybe a little bit, but I don't know what it is. What does that process look like for you, understanding what's going on in their bioenergetic model and their state?
Yeah. So in the not too distant future, we'll have AI be able to recognize like people's facial gesture, because all energy is all linked. So you might be able to just read somebody's facial expressions and understand what their biology is. I think we'll get there. I mean, I think a friend of mine came up with a technology to use AI and facial recognition to determine if you've got COVID or not. Right now, we've got, basically surrogates for our health. So what does it look like when a patient comes to me? Is one, I do a bioenergetic assessment. So I'm asking them about those 7 bioenergetic elements in their life, and then, seeing what type of symptoms that they have. Once I get their bioenergetic assessment in terms of what their lifestyle is, I also do a pretty complete laboratory analysis. I'm looking at markers for inflammation. I'm looking at markers for cardiovascular disease. I'm looking at markers for insulin resistance, because those are the big ones.
Yeah.
And I also test for some micronutrients, or the main ones that people are deficient in. And I would probably say that if people start to just shift their bioenergetic state through lifestyle, a lot of those other things change. But for some people, there are some, new methods in anti-aging when it comes to hormone optimization, nutrient optimization, and peptide therapy. I put some people on that, but here's the good news. For the most part, you don't really need that per se. I mean, if you look at centenarians from people that live in Sardinia or in Okinawa, they don't got any of that fancy stuff. They're just right at the basics. And the basics are basically those 7 bioenergetic elements we talk about in my book.
Yeah. And we mentioned them before. I love that. And so you're very energetic and empowering. And I'm sure anyone who's come in contact with you directly, is able to follow. But how do you get people to change habits and routines? I think everyone has these good intentions. How do you get people to really persevere and to make that shift?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I have something I put people through in my program, which is called the Hero Prescription. It's really just my framework of how do I work with people. And Hero stands for something, HERO. And H is hunger, right? If you want to make people change, very oftentimes I find that if it's just for themselves, they're not going to do it. So people need to know what drives them. What is their hunger? What is their why? Are they changing because they want to be the best versions of themselves for their children, for their spouse, for their community, for their family? What is it? Usually if it's for themselves, it really reaches a limit. You're not going to draw in. They're like, okay, well, I don't really need to do that for myself. But if it's for something bigger, knowing your why, like Simon Sinek said, knowing that why is so important. So once I know that, it's always a lever I can tug on somebody that I'm working with. The next part, E, is energy, which is really the bioenergetic state. It's really 7 bioenergetic elements. Where are they? What are the things that are really throwing them off? And how do we install new things? The R part is reclamation. And what is reclamation? It's really knowing your identity and seeing you as this next version of yourself. So 1, you've got the hunger. And then, 2, you've got the tools that you need and what you need to do to install new habits. What's going to make you move on that? For me, my energy before was, I'm somebody that was not enough, and I would never reach that. And I'm always chasing. But what about installing a new identity? What about saying, no, I am somebody that shows up. I'm somebody that wants to do the work. I'm somebody who wants to contribute this to the world, and knowing that every single day. And I have a person visualize who they want to be physically, how they want to contribute, and leaving them with that identity so that they can say, okay, now I've got all these things that Dr. Vuu wants me to do, for my bioenergetic state. I am this type of person to do that. And the last part is, a lot of people come to me because look, everything in the bioenergetic state thing, you can learn from my book. Thrive State, or you could take my course, the Thrive State Accelerator. But some people, want to go a little bit deeper. And that's when we do the lab work. That's when we maybe look at their hormones and optimize that. That's the O, which is optimization. Because for some people, they wanted to just sort of get to that next level. And there's certain things, as we age, we tend to lose, certain things like, our hormones naturally kind of decline. Now, working on your bioenergetic state will make sure that everything's optimally functioning to a certain level. But for those people who want like a little extra boost with the latest in sort of integrative medicine, regenerative medicine, things like that, that's the optimization part.
What are your favorite hacks in the optimization parts for those biohackers out there, myself a bit included? Which areas do you find the most exciting? What's happening at the moment?
I keep things pretty simple. I mean, I'm willing to try a lot of different things. And, I've spent so much in trying to upgrade my body that I don't know what is doing what,
The accumulation and then the placebo effect probably as well, right?
Yeah, but here's a cool thing too. Like, I don't mind, the placebo effect. I just want to know, I was like, hey, look, if it works and my mind making it work, hey, I'm willing to pay, right?
Yeah. Well, you'd save some money, I guess, if you know it was
right.
the placebo.
Right.
As well.
What are some of my favorites? Well, I love a nice ice bath in cold plunge.
What's your time limit? What can you manage?
I'm in there for 5 to 7. And honestly, I could be in there longer, but I'm just like, hey, this is good. I'll get out for a few minutes and I'll jump in again.
Do you do it with like the Wim Hof breathing technique beforehand?
Yeah, I do that with Wim Hof breathing. I was at an A-Fest, which is a Mind Valley conference, and he was there and we all jumped into the jacuzzi together, filled. But it wasn't the true experience.
Cold jacuzzi, I get it. Right?
It was a cold jacuzzi, but there was a lot of warm bodies. So I don't think we got as cold as we did, but it was great practice for when I did it later on. I find that to be very helpful. A lot of people are into a lot of the greater hacks. I like to keep things very simple. I intermittent fast. And
what does that look like for you? What is your time window?
My time window is like 1 p.m. to about 6 or 7 p.m. And I just want to let people know this. It's like, if you just look at how our ancestors did it, that's probably the right way. And what did they do? There are times that they ate and there's times they didn't. They did not eat 3 times a day.
No.
And it wasn't every day that they necessarily ate, and not every day that they, fasted. There were sometimes they ate more than others. So I feel that variability, might be fine, but I know people want to stick to a schedule and it's good for their lives. Mine is a little bit more schedulized, but if you just think, hey, I don't need to eat all the time, and just eat when you're hungry, eat when your body gives you a little tug versus emotional eating or, eating when you're bored, just to fill in a gap.
Yeah.
So,
and I think what you said before also with that reconnecting with your body is actually reconnecting with what is actually hunger, right? So I think so many of us have grown up for, you have your 3 meals a day. Some people even have like 5 meals a day with snacks and things as well. You've actually forgotten what the sensation is to feel real, like genuine hunger. And actually, if you study it as well, and I mean, you'll know this better than me, but if you actually wait long enough, the hunger sensation will go. And people who've done longer fasts, myself included. I mean, if I have sparkling water with some fresh lemon, if I'm feeling hungry and this is on a fast, it actually goes away within 5 minutes. And then I'm fine again for the next 24 hours. And if I talk to the people, they're like, you're starving yourself. What are you doing? And I was like, no, I'm actually, rejuvenating myself. And it's really great for the body.
And it feels really great for anybody who hasn't tried it yet. You feel so much sharper, you're not sluggish. And just like you said, you basically did that very thing, like Viktor Frankl. You created space with a little bit of time, with a little bit of sparkling water, which is why I drank it so much, because there were so many bad things.
I have it myself here.
I'm like, no, I'm going to grab this instead.
With the fresh lemon as well. You touched on something that I really love as a personal topic also that I've been sort of discovering with the last years, but purpose and the why. How do you advise patients and clients and people you come in touch with and inspire on finding their purpose and finding their why? How do you help, or what advice do you give them on that journey?
Well, that's a great question. And I struggled with this for a little bit too. But, I had done the science behind, studying purpose and this concept called eudaimonic happiness, which is the happiness you feel when you feel connected to something bigger. It's the happiness that you feel when you're giving back. And it turns out that people that develop this eudaimonic happiness or purpose, in America, they live 7 years longer. You've got a lower chance of getting a cardiovascular event, such as a heart attack or a stroke. Your telomeres are also longer. And for those people who don't know what telomeres are, they're basically these base pairs at the end of your DNA that protect your DNA from getting degraded. So it's a marker for longevity. And so the next question is, if purpose or eudaimonic happiness has so much great health benefits, how the heck do I find mine? And you can
Yes.
get into a state of analysis paralysis going, oh man, really need to find mine. And it's, as I start to study from the spiritual teachers, it's less a matter of finding rather than remembering.
I like that.
Remembering that our natural state, if I look at my daughter now, she is, constantly in a state of joy. And if she's not, it's because she needs something, right? She's hungry or something's uncomfortable. That's her natural state. And those emotions, those positive anti-aging emotions that I talk about, we all have them as kids. I mean, unless we were given like a lot of trauma, but I mean, we know what gives us those positive emotional states.
Yeah.
And if we can remember those things that give us those positive emotional states, and we do those things are kind of like our passions, which is ingrained into our own DNA. And if we do those things and we serve other people with them and sharing us with other people, then really that's our purpose. And our purpose is also this. Our purpose is also the gifts of the struggle that we have been through, that we have overcome, and now have this power, the superpower, because we've overcome something, and share that. So our purpose really is all the things that bring us joy, and it's all those things that life has given to us to overcome. It's really us. Your purpose is you. Your purpose is just sharing you with other people, with your community, with your neighbor, with your family, with the world at large, and sharing your gift. And your gift is really just the authentic version of you. So as you discover you, if you discover, what brings you those positive emotional states again, that's the cool thing. I mean, our biology is really gifting us with abundant health and peak performance when we know who we are, and then we get to serve the brilliance of who we are with other people.
Wow, that's so powerful. So beautifully said. And thank you so much. And I think that's the, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? So that we go on and then being in service to others and giving back again. And what gratitude and pleasure it is to also serve others and being able to share something that was so difficult and traumatic and vulnerable in your personal journey. And the fact that you've taken that, turned it around, and now are helping so many people around the world. So it's really, really incredible. I'd like to talk about emotional intelligence, which you obviously have a very high EQ. You said that you've trained it partially, but I think it's probably some of it's innate as well. But can you talk a little bit about EQ or emotional intelligence, emotional quantum, and how is it different to IQ? And are there ways to actually improve someone's EQ and why this is important?
So emotional intelligence is just really being aware of your emotions and how it affects your actions, your behaviors, and all of those things, and understanding where things are coming from and being able to shift your emotions as necessary. Your IQ or your intelligence quotient really are basically the aptitudes that you might be given with, like how well you're able to understand a concept or to be able to make certain calculations. That's your IQ. It's completely different from your EQ. But your EQ is so important because you transfer your emotions, your energy to other people. And if you're in those lower vibrational emotional states, anger, fear, resentment, jealousy, worry, anxiety, your ability to think in that state is diminished, and your ability to communicate with another person is diminished, and your ability to influence the other person is also very diminished, which is why EQ is so important in business settings and in speaking and being able to coach, because if you're in those emotional states, you're really not going to get across what you truly want to get across. And being able to understand that and being able to understand, okay, where are you in the emotional realm? And can I then tap into more positive emotional states or emotional states that are more constructive for conversation, for communication, for influence, for co-elevation of other people? It's super important. And yes, you can train that. And, a lot of the practices come really from awareness. Can you always pause where you're at and go, oh, I'm triggered again. All right. Oh, where did that trigger come from? All right. Let me explore the ways that thing is, has come from, and always constantly being able to be the awareness, being aware that you are aware. Once you are in that state, you can maybe from the bird's eye view start to see some of the old programming and go, oh, okay, that's old programming. I could choose something different.
The steps, just to recap. So basically the pausing, then the awareness, and then the
Choice.
realization, and then the choice, right? And then you rewire yourself, and then you go from there, which gets you to this thrive state of being able to re-choose your emotions. And yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Really, really great. I have a few rapid fire questions for you
Sure.
that we're always interested in hearing before we wrap up. And I've really been enjoying this. I feel like we could talk all day. What are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
Yeah, bad areas are a lot of people right now in the States talk about hormone optimization, talk about some of the new type of hacks that could be potentially very expensive. Some people do stem cells, exosomes, and things like that, as well as, do hormone optimization. I think, is important, great, but you need to optimize somebody's bioenergetic state first, you
Yeah.
know? Don't
Mhm.
throw thousands and thousands and tens upon thousands of dollars, with these products when
Mhm.
you're not mastering somebody's bioenergetic state.
Bioenergetic, yeah. Mhm.
Right? Because if you're in a poor bioenergetic state, your markers are all going to be off just because you're in the poor bioenergetic state.
Yeah.
And you're going to be more in an inflammatory state. What a lot of these other things do, they're great in terms of being able to have growth factors to help put people in a more elevated state, but they attack inflammation first. You're pouring in all these things with, you're just fixing basically the hole in your boat rather than,
Yeah.
kind of building it up. So I would probably say, one of the mistakes people do is they don't work on the lifestyle factors first. Let
Mhm.
that be your base. From that point on, then you see if there's still any other cracks that you could use new technologies for,
Mhm.
but don't use that first if you've got a lot of leaks in your boat.
Yeah, that's really wise advice. What are some of the learnings or insights that your clients you work with have found the most valuable?
What I think they find most valuable is really, the pause,
Mhm.
right? I
Mhm.
think so many people just like myself a few years ago and myself now that I catch myself, I'm still like
Mhm.
this every day. So I'm not going to let people know I'm some guru that doesn't go
You're
through this,
human. Yeah.
but
You're
the
an
monkey mind,
optimized human, I should say.
right?
Yeah.
Right. The monkey mind is there. The monkey mind is something that we got trained to do. That's where all the old programmings, the not enoughs, all these things that are
The
constantly
ego.
right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And that actually sits in something called the default mode network in our brain. And I just briefly touch upon, the work of psychedelics and what it can do to kind of like allow you to be a little bit more conscious of your monkey mind.
Mhm.
But recognizing that, being able to see that and being able to see that you've got a new choice and not necessarily there is, I think, something that my clients would go, oh, wow.
Mhm.
Oh, I was in the Matrix.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if people are aware of
Of
that movie.
course. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
I'm
Yeah.
in the Matrix. Oh, okay. I could choose something different. And that distinction there, I think, is very empowering because really that movie is really what Viktor Frankl says between stimulus and response. There's that space. And
Mhm.
then you've got that seat of the power. And there are
Mhm.
certain days I'm like, you know what? I'm in the Matrix. And you know what? I'm just going to torture myself in here for a little bit just because. And
Just
then,
so that tomorrow I'll remember why I do what I
right,
do.
right, right. That's my
Yeah.
choice. I'm going to do that. And then you're like, oh my God, okay, that's enough here. I'm going to choose different and I'm going to make a different direction.
I love that. What is your, and you've given us some really beautiful quotes, but do you have one favorite quote or piece of advice that has been a real game changer for you?
Yeah. So there's a quote from Byron and Katie, which Tony Robbins adapted to, which is things in life don't happen to you,
Mhm.
they happen for you.
Mhm.
And I butchered the quote. It's something like that. And that just goes to show this that, no matter where you are, if you can always see, your life and use that mindset shift to approach anything you have in life, you can
Mhm.
shift your emotional state right there.
Mhm.
When my
Mhm.
bank accounts went like, dropped, when COVID first hit, I
Mhm.
was faced with that. I was like, oh my gosh, how is this happening for me? Right?
Well, I'm
Right?
sure you learned something through it, right? What was your
Yeah.
learning?
Well, absolutely. Well, I had to put exactly what, I was writing my book and it was like thrive state. How is this thriving right now when my bank account just went, whoa,
Thriving
boom.
despite the bank account.
Right. Right. I had, a partner in my life. I had a daughter who was, still in her mom's womb. I had a new bonus daughter come my life. And then right at that point, like I've never been lower, before with all my assets and with business, like, booming. And I was like, how is this the thrive state? And here's the thing, like, prior to that, I've never really opened my heart or my
Mhm.
mind or my
Mhm.
life to
Mhm.
anybody. I was constantly thinking of myself. And
Mhm.
really, it was an opportunity for us to come in together, be vulnerable with each other. And, you know, really that point in my life has allowed, me to open up my heart so much more. And that has been invaluable. And so, that quote is just very, very special, because if you can really accept what that quote is, you can always take whatever you're going through at that moment and ask yourself at that moment,
Mhm.
rather than wait the next year, 5 years down the line where you learn your lesson. You could be like, oh no, I'm going to figure it out now. I'm going to figure out now, how is this happening for me now?
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
you'll figure it out in 5 years ago. Oh, okay, yeah, that was a blessing. But
Yeah.
why give yourself the 5 years of torture and just go, okay, well, how is this a blessing now? How
Yeah.
is this happening for me now? And
Yeah.
if you can practice that as a practice and build that into emotional muscle, very, very powerful tool, because you'll then have another practice to build emotional mastery, and again, mastering your emotions is really mastering the medicine for your life.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that. And Steve Jobs said in a Stanford commemoration speech from 2005, it's only when you look back can you connect the dots. And I think that's really nicely said, because you realize it. But I really like your hack to say, even though you're feeling the pain, the pressure, the state at the moment, like what could be the benefit of it, and shifting that view, that perspective
Yeah,
in the moment instead of waiting for 5 years of that. So
yeah.
that's really good advice. What has been your most exciting purchase in the last 6 months? I love details and brands.
Ooh. Most exciting purchase in the last six
Mm-hmm.
months.
Can be $10, can be $100, $1,000,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think here. Oh, yes. I was saying my most exciting purchase, which is also a sleep hack,
Oh, okay.
because it
Perfect.
helps me with sleep, which is something called a snoo, SNOO. And if you don't know what that is, it's a baby crib that like causes a
That rock.
little swivel or rock. So it allows my daughter to sleep through the
What?
night.
The question, is it for you or for her?
Well, it's for both of us. It's a win-win all around.
Win-win.
Yeah.
A snoo, very cool. Yeah, and anything to have the kids sleep, I know exactly. What's been the biggest challenge you faced in the last 5 years? So you've talked about a few different ones, but what would you call your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome that?
That's great. I mean, there's so many challenges. I mean, one, we've got the health challenge, we've
Hmm.
got sort of COVID challenge, transitioning all of that. I would
Hmm.
probably say that, it's related to what I talked about before, was really, we're transitioning a lot of, beings and souls in my household right now.
Hmm.
We've got my bonus daughter who, still probably feels a little bit of resistance, not understanding, what this new dynamic is. And there is some, times she goes, I hate you and things like that. And that's very hurtful.
Hmm.
But, there are times I respond negatively to that. And like, okay, well, I'm providing this home. How do you feel that way? Then I'm like, no, look at what this child has gone through. She's
Hmm.
gone through a divorce. She's gone through this thing and transitioning. Now I got to compete, with time with mommy, with this guy, with this fool. Right. And understanding that. Right. And seeing how I could show up better as a person, showing up for my partner, who've had her share of traumas. I've had my share of traumas, that put up
Hmm.
walls, to each other. All
Hmm.
right. How can we let that wall down? How can
Hmm.
we show up with love, even in times we want to fight? That's been constant work that I choose. And then, showing up as a dad and being somebody that my younger one, and I feel this with both my children. How do I show up as the very best version of myself to them? What type of life? How do I teach them self-worth? A lot of that I'm navigating now, and I never got a chance to navigate that. I was what, 40, 40 years, I was pretty much not willing to open up my heart. And I would probably
Hmm.
say it's a challenge, but it's also a challenge I take on very happily. And I
Hmm.
know that I'm evolving myself as a man, as a father, as a lover during this
Hmm.
process.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And so powerful as well. And I guess this will also be more information that you can be sharing in your learning journey on this to help other people as well. So it
Yeah.
sounds really profound. You are so high energy and doing so many amazing things at the same time. What are your weekly or daily routines and practices that have really helped you perform at such a high level?
Yeah, so it's all routines. When it's not built into a routine and practice, then
Mhm.
you can be assured that the monkey mind will come around, right? And
Mhm.
it's really the monkey mind paired in with, all the junk from society's teaching as you're growing older or whatever, that combination there
Bad
is what leads to
combination.
chronic disease, right? When we could just tap into who we really are and why we're really meant to be here and just celebrate that is really, truly, it's medicine. So because we were kind of programmed in that way, I think unless you learn meditation earlier on as children, which I'm going to see how I can implement that into my children's life, is practices. And so, I wake up in the morning, probably about, 5:30 or 6 every morning. And I go outside, I'm getting some sunlight and I'm moving. And then I go to a gym where I am with community. My trainer is a Hollywood trainer. He trains a lot of celebrities, but he's also one of the most positive people I know. And putting myself in people that have that kind of energy is infectious.
Yeah.
You want to be successful, you want to be healthy, pick the right community because that energy is infectious. You'll pick up on their mindset. You'll pick up on their habits. So I have that. And then after that, I'm really kind of looking at myself and I'm practicing sort of a combination of visualization and meditation. Like, how does the perfect day look? How do I want to show up today? There's going to be stuff that hits me. How do I want to show up? And just telling myself that from the beginning. This is really part of that reclamation part of my heroes process is like this new identity. Can I be that? Even though I might not feel that way, can I be that like intentionally? And I go on through my day knowing that, hey, there's going to be some curveballs throughout the day and things like that. But setting that morning ritual, that morning routine is so important because, I know so many people, the first thing that they do, they wake up is go to their phones. And right when you go to your phone, that's when you say, okay, monkey mind.
Yeah.
This
then you're
body
in
is yours.
list. Yeah. I have to be reactive and I'm behind in those emails. Yeah. It's a downhill battle there. Right. So powerful to start your day like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of other stuff I do during the day, but I would probably say just starting off my day with that is so important. And then there's little practices too practices that I do with my partner to make sure that, we're connected every day, because sometimes, you could dive into your work and you're not connected, and having practices to include each other, like every time we leave each other and come back, we got to make sure we connect first, which isn't something that I get to try or do. So,
I like that. Would you mind expanding a bit on that? How does that work?
Well, yeah, there's a coming and going, right? And you can either come and go and not connect as a unit. And this just might be leaving the house or leaving the room or whatever it may be. But, I usually am up, my partner or my fiance is up sometimes in the middle of the night feeding the baby, which I don't wake up for, but she could be tired during the day, but
not untypical.
Sometimes I would just leave and go into work because she's still sleeping. But now I know that, as I leave, maybe just connecting for a second, it could be embrace and acknowledgement of, here we are, and as I return from whatever I'm doing, hey, let's connect first before we talk about what we need to do with kids. Let's just, be here. Let's check in and ground our energies together as a unit.
That's so powerful. I really, really like that. Yeah, I think this is going to be a part 2 conversation. We can dig into some of these really amazing aspects. What are some of the most exciting parts of the future of health, well-being, and longevity that you see coming in the next years?
Well, I think, there's 2 things. One, I believe that, old school is coming back. The practices that basically our ancestors have to live a long life, and those practices, people will just start to understand, hey, I don't need all these fancy things to live a life full of health, vibrancy, and joy, and have peak performance. I don't need to pay into that much. It's all these lifestyle things. Those practices are coming back. And I feel that, what's new is exciting is actually quite old. So that's number one. And so the second thing is there are some really, really cool things when it comes to testing the epigenome in terms of, measuring our age, things that have to do with embryonic stem cells and their ability to help lower inflammation and to heal things in the body. That's really exciting. And really looking at different parts of our genes to go, oh, okay, you've got a small propensity to, not handle this certain grain or this nutrient or whatever very well. There's more precision medicine as we get a little bit more advanced. I think that's all cool. And they're really kind of divergent parts of each other. One part is really, hey, we could do it all ourselves and these older practices. And then the other part is using technology to maybe kind of take us up a notch, up to the next level. So I think all that stuff.
Yeah. It's exciting what's happening. And I think there's such an explosion. I was listening to David Sinclair speaking, and I mean, he's been in the space for such a long time. And he said alone the last 3 years, I mean, he's having trouble keeping up. There's such an exponential explosion of all these different areas and optimizations that are coming through. So yeah, it's an exciting space to be in. For my listeners interested in understanding more about your work, where they can buy your book, how they can follow you, can you share some of the resources that they can do that and where they can find your book?
Absolutely. So you could get a copy of my book at thrivestatebook.com. You can even sign up if you want the first 3 chapters where I talk about the bioenergetic state emailed to you instantly. Go to that site, thrivestatebook.com. You can get it wherever books are sold as well. How do you find out a little bit more about what I do? My website is Kien Vuu, MD. That's KIENVUU.com or MD.com. It leads to the same place. You can find out more about my work, my speaking and whatnot. And also at kienvuu.com, you could find my Thrive State Accelerator. So, in addition to my book, it's basically what I do with my one-on-one clients, with my celebrity clients in LA. I break that all down to a course. And right now, it's not launched yet, but people could still purchase it. It's half off now, but I'll give your listeners a code. If you use the code podcast25 when you're signing up for the Thrive State Accelerator, you get an additional 25% off. And then I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram at Kien Vuu, MD.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'll link all of these in the show notes as well. Just before we finish up, do you have any final ask, recommendation, or parting thoughts or message for my audience?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody out there that, the doctor of the future is you. And really, you are your best medicine.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this advice and inspirational talk, Dr. V. It's been such a pleasure to have you on today.
Hey, it was great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, this is Claudia again. Before you take off, thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you learned as many valuable insights on living better for longevity as I did. I'd love you to join our longevity tribe so we can learn and grow together, as well as hear your feedback. So please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. Thanks so much and take care.